Love finances, the other F word, and want to support the show? Become a patron by going to patreon.com/FTOFW. You'll get special features, a shout out on the air, and early releases. Or if you prefer, pick up some merchandise at financestheotherfword.com.
Please do note that anything said in our podcasts are our opinions alone and are not meant to be taken as financial or legal advice.
Welcome to Finances, the Other F Word, a Gen Xer podcast for musicians and music lovers, where we discuss money and music without all the pretentious bullshit. Here are your hosts, Zoe Terry, attorney at large, Stormy Andrews, founder of Yokel Local Marketing, and Mel O, certified financial planner and author of Finances, the Other F Word. Listener discretion is advised.
Hey guys, welcome to Finances, the Other F Word. Today on the show, we're going to have a little bit different agenda because Zoe is, I think, on vacation or something like that.
Yeah, what's up with that?
Yeah, I don't know.
Some people.
Getting ready at school's getting ready to start here in Vegas at some point, and I guess she wanted to spend some family time with the, is this better?
Yeah, I'm just looking at Mel.
But now you
she's
can't.
Just like, hey, you can't see her face.
Now
it
the
wasn't
visual.
The look, you just kept moving it closer and closer to block your face.
Oh,
I'm
did
like,
I?
why is she hiding behind it?
Am I? I know
You're
that
still
I'm
behind it.
having a lot of technical difficulties
Yeah, I'm like,
today.
why are you struggling today?
I don't know. What is, you know,
Why
I
don't you move it
think
to the
I want
other
it over
side?
here.
Yeah, put it over
there.
there.
Is that better?
That is much better.
Okay.
Now you're not struggling so
All right,
much.
okay.
There it is.
So yeah, so she's having some family time with her kids, whatever. And so it's going to just be Stormy and I today.
Yep, here you go.
Yeah, and he will be traveling here in the next couple weeks. And by the way, what happened with your speakers thing?
Oh, my speakers thing. So that actually turned out really, really good. I, as our audience knows, I got a chance to speak at a breakout session at Influence 2019, which is the large national, annual conference that's put on by the National Speakers Association. So being invited to speak on stage is pretty awesome. But it's also a little different because when I speak to business owners, they think, oh my gosh, this guy was great. Well, now I'm speaking in front of professional speakers, people who do this for a living. So that's a quick way to find out if you're pretty decent at your craft, right?
Right.
Because they're going to be honest with you because it's an audience full of professional speakers. So to make a long story short, I crushed it. I'll just leave it at that. I crushed it. I killed it in terms of breakout session, had people that attended the breakout sessions, the vast majority of the people, and I don't want to say the vast majority of the people, but you had the ability of downloading the app. In the app, I would say most people downloaded the app because that is what gave you directions from what breakout section, session to the next, and it gave you the agenda for the conference for the few days. They also had a book version, but I would say most people probably use the app. But on the app, after you attended a session, you had the ability of rating the session on a 1 to a 1 star to 5 stars, 5 star being best, and I ended up with a 4.91 rating.
Fantastic.
Which is pretty awesome. And of all the breakout sessions that received, a substantial number of reviews, meaning 15 reviews or more, it's the highest rated. So I'll take it. That
That's
means
awesome.
I must know how to speak a little bit.
That means
or at least my topic was good.
That means next year, main stage.
Main stage. I'm working for the main stage.
All right,
absolutely.
I'm sending all kinds of
send the vibes.
Good
Listeners,
vibes.
send the vibes. Main stage next year for Stormy.
All the Stormettes out there
Absolutely.
that are apparently only fans of Stormy.
Right.
You guys can cheer on your man.
Absolutely.
Sandra might get a little jealous, but she'll be all right.
She'll be all right.
She'll be all right. So we wanted to talk a little bit about the national debt because the last time that we talked a little bit about understanding numbers in the economy and their importance, and we talked a lot about gross domestic product, or GDP for short, and its relevance in the economy. And I had touched on in that episode about the national debt, and we didn't really dig too much into it. So I wanted to revisit that topic today. And then we're going to talk a little bit about some of the best-selling metal albums of all time. And I don't know, Stormy will probably weigh in on some.
I'll throw in one or two.
Some
non-metal.
random stuff. Metal is the way to go. I'm just saying. So, oh, dear Lord. So our national debt. So February of this year, 2019, in the United States, we exceeded over $22 trillion in debt, We are the largest country, the largest debt to GDP ratio. We're the largest sovereign debt of any of the countries, with the second only behind us being the European Union, which is actually 28 countries.
Wow.
So now this isn't the highest it's ever been as far as a ratio, because, when you talk about numbers and you talk about, okay, this number's this and this number's that from 50 years ago, you have to take into account inflation and how it changes everything. So you can't really compare apples to apples, because the numbers they represent different things. So what you do is you use GDP, gross domestic product, which is again a measurement of what an economy produces, and you use it as a ratio to our outstanding debt, so you can see where we are as far as performance. Now, it is projected that in the year 2020 that the United States will be functioning at 110% of our GDP, which means that the output of the country will be, let's say, 100% of the output, but we are running a deficit of 10%. So we're living on credit.
Really?
Living on credit, yes.
That means, let's get this straight. Mm-hmm. Let's say if I make $100,000 a year.
Yep.
I'm spending $110,000.
You are. $110,000. So
I'm spending everything.
You're spending everything plus more.
Wow.
So let's carry that farther. So then the ways that you adjust it, with any household, the way that you adjust your budget is you have to either make more or spend less.
Correct.
Right? And so that's exactly what the government should be doing as well. And that's unfortunately just not what's happening. Now, again, this isn't the highest GDP's ever been, but it is the highest dollar amount that we've seen, and it broke that threshold March of 2018 when the high water mark had been 21 trillion. Now we're at 22 trillion, and I'll give you guys
Wait a second. We picked up $1 trillion since March?
Yeah, since
How does that happen?
March 15th of 2018, we broke the 21 trillion milestone, and then February 11th of 2019, we hit over 22 trillion.
Wow, that's a lot of zeros.
So yeah, we picked up a trillion in like 11 months or 13 months time.
So what's a healthy number? Let me ask you a question. Do you know? What would be considered a healthy number if I make $100,000? Mm-hmm. Should I take, using that as the example? Obviously, 110% doesn't sound healthy.
Right.
Is a healthy number 80%, 90%, 70%?
Yeah. So it depends. We've had times in the United States where we've had GDPs at 46%.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, of our debt, which obviously would be preferable. There's a lot of countries out there right now that are also functioning on very, very low GDP rates as far as to a portion of their debt. And when Andrew Jackson was in office, it was the only time in history we've ever paid our debt to zero.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I don't know what the specific ratio would be, but the thing that's so interesting about the number is that, so there's a couple different things that make up the number. So you have, when we talked on the David Bowie episode, we talked about Bowie bonds, where he took and he had his music catalog and he used that to issue Bowie bonds. And so for those of you who haven't listened to the episode, go back and listen to it. But to give you a quick synopsis, when a bond is issued on Wall Street, you buy a bond. Let's say that, Stormy's company is going to build a brand new office and it's going to cost $1 million. He can either go to a bank and borrow $1 million, or if the regulations are right, he can issue $1 million in bonds to the street. And let's say that, they're $1,000 each bonds, and they have a year maturity, a term of 10 years, and they pay 6% a year. Then basically what is happening is all the bondholders are stepping in and they are paying, they are lending Stormy the money so he can go build his building. He pays the $60 annually, 6% of the $1,000 annually.
Right.
And then at the end of 10 years, he gives you your last $60 plus your original $1,000 and you're done.
Right.
That's how bonds work. Well, that's exactly how the government gets money from us, besides taxes and besides other things. But the bulk of the way that the government, besides taxes, raises money is by issuing treasury bonds, treasury bills. And we talked about in the numbers episode, we talked about the yield curve, and we talked about what it means when it inverts, and we talked about the differences between the spreads. So all of these are kind of going hand in hand. So hopefully there will be some kind of consistency for you so you can kind of follow it through. Now, the deal is that currently, well, not currently, as of the best numbers that I could get, there's, basically two things that make up our total debt. One is the amount of debt that's held by the public. So this would be the amount of people or other countries, because other countries buy our bonds as well. So typically what happens is if we are, let's say it's 2009, the United States has just came through 2008, which was disastrous. We're still trying to recover at the beginning of 2009. We gave Europe our cold. Now Europe starts going through their recession. And so what you have is when you have a time of uncertainty, it's called a flight to quality. And what people do is they start investing in treasury bonds, which again are not FDIC insured. For the banking system over here, we have FDIC insurance, and treasury bonds are not FDIC insured, but they are considered safe in air quotes, because they are backed by the taxing authority of the United States government, with the belief that if they cannot pay us back for the money that we've lent them, that they will just raise our taxes and get the money back. So we have a whole bunch of other countries that come in and buy our debt as well, because it's considered safe and stable. And it used to be that United States holds the most of its own treasury, its own debt. Behind it used to be China. China had the most of our debt, and then behind that was Japan. Japan has leveraged out of it, and China has leveraged out of it. But I do think maybe China is still the second largest holder of our debt. But the amount of debt that we hold is so much greater than anything that China has. So basically, to give you guys kind of numbers here. So you have the debt that the American people or other countries purchase bonds, treasury bonds from the United States. And then you have the kind of whopper-jawed intergovernmental borrowing that they do from different divisions within themselves. But just to give you kind of an idea of what we're looking at. So as of, I believe it is February of the date that I just referenced, which I don't have in front of me now, I've already switched to another page, is the total outstanding debt. Now I had to go back to like elementary school and try to look at the numbers, and had to like figure out exactly how to say it and write it all down so I wouldn't trip over it. So our total outstanding debt is $22,279,932,477.98 at the time of my research.
Okay.
Out of that, 2/3 of it is held by the United States public and or other countries in the form of treasury bonds, where we have purchased from the United States government treasury bonds, and we have lent them money, and they have typically 10 years. That's the most common one, to pay us our interest. And then at the end of the 10-year term, they're going to give us back our $1,000 or whatever, and we're done with the transaction. Out of that amount, $16,246,630,031,126.64 is held by the American people. Now, the reason why this is such a big deal is because when you have a situation where you have GDP as a ratio to our deficit being over 100%, what ends up happening is that every time that the United States government needs to raise more money, they would typically issue new bonds. But if people are concerned that you're not going to pay them back, then they're not going to buy your bond of 10 years at a 2% interest rate. They're going to want, in order for them to give you and trust you with their $1,000 and $1,000 increments, they're going to want you to pay them a much higher interest rate, because they're concerned that you're not going to be able to pay them back. And as we keep creeping with our GDP ratio to our deficit, what ends up happening is that we as people who are buying these bonds, predominantly Americans, we are going to demand more and more interest rates from our government as far as to pay on these. And currently right now, out of the, and I got to find the number here, out of our debt that we've issued, just the interest on the debt. So out of that 20 whatever trillion dollars I just said that, or I'm sorry.
Trillion.
Yeah, our
16 trillion.
Out our 16 trillion plus some,
right.
Round up, our 16 trillion plus some out of that debt, just the interest that is a line item in our budget that the government is paying on those bonds that we've purchased is $479 billion.
Wow.
Now, if we continue to have a separation where we are not producing as much as we are, like basically we're living on credit, we're not producing as much as we are spending, what happens is that bonds, just like we talked about the Bowie bonds, they start falling down in the ratings. And in 2012, the United States Treasury bond got downgraded for the first time in history, and it was a huge deal, and it was still considered an AA rating. So there's 3 different places that rate bonds, and they go from they're each different scales, but like say AAA plus to AAA to AAA minus to AA plus to AA, et cetera. And they downgraded, Standard & Poor's downgraded the U.S. Treasury bond for the first time in history, and it was a huge deal, and it was a big concern. And then everybody stopped freaking out about it, and they moved on. So if we continue to do this, we continue to spend more than we're actually producing as an economy, what happens is that every time that they try to go get more money from people through the issuance of Treasury bonds, we are going to demand higher and higher interest to be paid for the potential default risk that the United States government could be facing. And if in the event that the United States government did default on its debt, it would be a global catastrophe because the amount of debt that we have and the intertwined, and we are the biggest economy in the world, with China being second. So the fact that the national debt is getting as large as it is, even though it's not the largest it's ever been, but typically the times that we've seen a very big swelling of our GDP ratio versus our deficit has been during times of war or during times of depression. It's something that we need to be very cognizant of, given the fact that we haven't been in that for the last. We bottomed in the stock market in 2009 in the United States, and then, we've been recovering since then. So the fact that our ratio is so high, that's a big deal. And the rest of the $22 trillion in debt that we have is that intergovernmental sharing between the two. Now, in the Social Security episode that we covered, we talked about the fact that when we pay into Social Security, it goes into the Social Security Trust Fund, and then what happens with that money is that the United States government turns around and buys its own Treasury bonds. And so in that episode, we talked about the concern of defaulting on Social Security and Social Security running out of money by 2034, and the fact that there was a concern that Social Security in this country isn't even funded because, hypothetically, when our tax dollars go into Social Security, the United States government turns around and they buys Treasury bonds, then those proceeds go into the general fund and then is spent. So that's where the concern is, and we covered that in another episode. But this is the reason why these bond issues are such a big deal and GDP is such a big deal. And one of the biggest catastrophes that we've seen, and we're going to be doing another podcast on Brexit and the Eurozone and the European Union and the International Monetary Fund, and we'll explain how all that stuff is intertwined. But I just wanted to touch on the situation with Greece. Now, back in 2008 and 9, after we bottomed out at the beginning, first quarter of 2009, and Europe got our cold, what ended up happening was that we had what was called the PIGS countries. So it was Portugal, Ireland, Italy, Greece, and Spain. And they were trending at way higher deficit to GDP ratio, meaning that same thing, they were living on credit, and it almost collapsed the Eurozone. And they put in some different austerity measures. Spain's managed to pull it together. Ireland and Italy have managed to pull it together. But Greece has continued to be the thorn in everybody's side. And Greece is a country that has the output of like a Connecticut. Right?
Okay.
So they're a little tiny country, and they had to overhaul some austerity measures, which I'll just briefly touch on. But what ended up happening was that, like right now, if you get a treasury bond from the United States for 10 years, you might get 2%, meaning that they're going to pay you 2% a year every year. And at the end of the term, whether it's be 10 years or whatever, you're going to get your last interest payment and the principal, meaning what you purchased the bond for. And again, following this whole GDP ratio thing, if people are concerned that you're going to default, they're going to make you pay them higher money. And Greece was so indebted because of the simple fact that a big part of it was their pensions. And I can't remember if this is the exact age, but I'm almost positive it is. They had 70%, 60 or 70% of the population of Greece worked for the government. And the retirement age there was like 50.
Wow.
or 55, and they retired with 80% of their income. So we know that on average, people are living into their 90s, and especially in the European countries, they have a lot longer lifespans than we do.
Absolutely.
And so it was a whole big deal. And what ended up happening was that Greece as of now is running about 183%. So where we are expected to hit in the United States in 2020 110%, they're at 183%.
Wow.
They're still, and so when they said there was austerity measures just means strict measures. That's all it means. The European Union stepped in and the Eurozone, and they're like, dude, you need to overhaul your shit. Put austerity measures on Greece. Greece went into a recession because of it. There was protests. There was a whole bunch of changes. And what happened is that Greece's likelihood of repaying was so serious that it was so much in doubt that they were issuing treasury bonds. The country of Greece were issuing their equivalent of treasury bonds at 32% yield.
Annual? Come
yeah,
on.
32%. Yeah, 32. But nobody's buying. Nobody was buying it because they knew that they were going to default, and that's exactly what happened. Greece ended up almost going into default. They got saved in 2010, where the EU stepped in and they gave them more money to try to float them and not have them default. And most of that debt is held by private European banks. And so then they almost defaulted again, and then they had to step in again to give them a loan to get the payments that they should have been making. So literally what they did was they got a loan to fix the economy, didn't fix it. They gave them another loan so that they could use those monies to pay them back on the loan they've already given them. So it's like having a credit card and needing to make a payment, and then going over to this credit card and pulling cash down and then making a payment on that, except both credit cards are from the same bank. That's literally what they ended up doing. And so, again, this is the reason why watching this number is going to be so very important and so vital. And it does tie directly into the health of the bond market, which can tie directly into the Social Security fund, which we touched on last time. And when you see yields start to shoot up on bonds, that's very concerning, because if you have a bond that is a 10-year maturity and is yielding you 2%, or a bond that has a 10-year maturity that's yielding you 7%, then you know as an investor that the 7% yield on that bond, you're getting the higher yield because they have a less of a probability of being a less likelihood to be able to repay you, or there's a steeper risk that they might not be able to repay you. Their financial conditions are in question. And so if we start seeing that the treasury bonds yields start moving up, yields start moving up, then what ends up happening is that means that people are starting to get nervous about it. And China has already been, over the last 6 years, getting out of our treasuries. And that could be for a variety of reasons. And, in the event that if something happened and the United States government, for some reason, and I don't ever think this would happen, but if they decided that they couldn't pay back the $16 trillion that the bondholders held, that is literally a loss of $16 trillion of wealth in the United States, because that's the 2/3 of the debt that we hold is to us, and then the government owns some of it. And so it's important that you understand those relationships, and that when you're hearing these things, you can kind of tie them all in together. And so that's why we did the bond episode, and then we did in the numbers episode, and then we talked about Social Security, and now we're talking about national debt, and then we'll move on to the European countries next episode. But that's depressing.
Wow.
Yeah, good. Yeah, I'm serious. I sat there like a little kid. I was like drawing out in the air 16 trillion. Like I'm literally typing it up. So there's that.
Man, so if that happens, it'd be tough to go out there and buy some albums.
Yeah, I think a lot of consumer discretionary spending would probably be limited, I would assume. Yeah.
Huh. Well,
Yeah.
good thing this didn't happen before some of the best-selling albums of all time happened.
Okay, all
Let's
right.
talk about some music.
Are they metal albums? Because I got some metal albums.
Metal
so-
sucks.
Oh, whatever. I don't.
Metal
That's a
sucks.
bunch of bullshit. Okay, what do you got for me? I swear to God, if you give me any Creed, I'm gonna be so pissed at you.
I was actually going to start with Creed.
You better not start with Creed. Are you
Okay, I'm
serious?
going to take Creed off the list then. Creed, you're off the list.
Are you seriously? You have something with Creed?
I can find Creed.
No,
I
don't.
did not have anything with
Don't
Creed.
find Creed. I'm not a fan of Creed or Nickelback.
Okay, so here's some trivia for the audience. If you can place these in order in your mind, then I'll give you the answers, okay?
Okay.
Best-selling albums of all time. I'm going to give you a few choices.
Okay.
So let's take Madonna, the Immaculate Collection.
Okay, that's her. I have that. That's
You
her
have that
greatest
one?
hits. Yep.
Okay, her greatest hits. Then let's take Alanis Morissette, Jagged Little Pill.
Okay.
And we have the Beatles, Sgt. Pepper, Lonely Hearts Club Band, right? Mm-hmm. So if we take those three albums in order, which one sold more to least? So we have Alanis Morissette, the Beatles, and Madonna.
So, given the fact that the Beatles have the largest net worth, which we talked about on a previous podcast, I'm going to go with Beatles number one.
Beatles number one, okay.
Then I'm going to go with, I don't have a problem with Alanis Morissette, but I'm not a huge fan, so I'm going to assume she sold less albums than Madonna, especially because it's the Immaculate Collection greatest hits. So I
Right.
will go Beatles, Madonna, and Jagged Little Pill.
You were so close, except you are wrong on every one.
How is that even close then?
That's even close. Well, just I wanted to make you feel good.
Oh, okay.
So trip out on this, okay? This
All
one
right.
was a shocker. Number one of the group, Alanis Morissette.
No way.
Yes.
No way.
Yes. Certified copies sold at 24.4 million, right?
Of Jagged Little Pill?
Jagged Little Pill.
I mean, how many number ones did that have? Like 3 or 4?
Hey, she crushed it. Now I understand why she was able to disappear.
Yeah, and she used to be not used to be, she's a Canadian. So
Okay.
she changed, she was like a pop artist in Canada, and she came over the border and turned into like an alternative rock edgy chick. Obviously it worked if she's...
It worked.
Wait, she's better, more than the Beatles?
More than the Beatles.
Sgt. Pepper.
Sgt. Pepper. So now let me ask you a question. Between Sgt. Pepper and Madonna, which one gets the number 2 spot? We've got Sgt. Pepper, Lonely Hearts Club Band, or Madonna, the Immaculate Collection.
You know what? I'm going to go with Madonna still.
You blew it again.
No way.
Beatles, then Madonna. So the Beatles came in at 18.2 million, followed by Madonna at oh, excuse me. You know what? You were right.
Was I right? I'm
yeah,
sorry.
you're
What was
right.
that? I was right? I was right?
Madonna at 19.4 million.
Ah.
Beatles at 18.2.
Well, and the only reason why I was saying that is because I can't imagine that when Madonna came up, people were still buying, but they were more readily available because you didn't use albums, you had cassettes.
Right.
So I just assumed she pushed more items just as far as like from a number standpoint.
Right.
But that's crazy because Sgt. Pepper's was out in the 60s, right? I'm not a Beatles
Yeah.
fan, so
But yeah, 67.
67. So it's been around longer than both of them. And both of them were outsold. Maybe it's the
Yeah.
demographic. That sucks.
And let's take the number 1 selling album of all time.
Okay.
Who's that? That would be Michael Jackson's Thriller
Okay.
at 47.3.
47 million.
47.3. Now, I'm going by certified copies. You know, there's
Okay.
claimed copies, but I'm looking at Wikipedia. That's the source that I'm using.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm looking at certified copies.
Hmm.
So certified says 47, claimed to 66, but somewhere in between.
Because I thought they said at one time that like 1 in 3 or 5 people owned Thriller.
Well, I don't know.
I don't know either because that still sounds... Because I know
Maybe
I
it
bought
was
it twice.
1 in 3 adults.
Yeah.
Because you could take kids out of the equation, and
Yeah.
that would make sense.
Yeah, even though I owned it twice because
There
I
you
used
go.
to have it in my little boombox, and I kept taking the tape and I would carry the boombox around. It was this hot-ass, humid Florida. And then I'd leave it out overnight like a dumbass. And then all of my boom boxes would just corrode and crap because it's all the humidity, and I still did it anyway. So,
I'll tell you.
does it say Off the Wall? Is Off the Wall in there? Because I think that was a big seller. I know it wasn't anywhere close to Thriller. And then after that, I know that his album sales obviously never achieved that again. But I still own
Off
Thriller.
the Wall. You know, Off the Wall, that was an older album. That's before he became, you know,
Big.
Big. Because after Thriller, you've got Bad. We can all remember Bad, followed
course.
by Dangerous. And
I have that one, and Bad.
Yeah, there you go. And then Off the Wall, probably, he sold tons of them, but that's down the chart. He wasn't the big star.
That was his
on Off the
first solo album after the Jackson 5, right?
Wall. Off the Wall?
Yeah.
Sounds about right.
I have is like, living off the wall. Dun, dun, living off the wall. That's all I have in my head right now. All right. Do you have any other
No, that's all I'm going to go with because I want to hear metal because I'm still shocked that people bought metal albums.
Yes, metal is not dead.
Really?
Yeah, shout out to the European countries because they've really kept metal alive and it is kind of petered in the United States, which kind of sucks. So not necessarily the Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts, but we're talking about metal, Zeppelin. So out of the top 10, this is from Loudwire, the top 10 biggest selling metal albums of all time. Led Zeppelin has 1, 2, 3, 4 in the top 10. So if you ever had any doubts of how amazing Led Zeppelin was before, unquestionable. So at the top, they are the top with Zeppelin 4 at 23 million albums sold. So I understand this is not an MJ Thriller album, okay? Right. It's half of it. But this also came out again when people were still buying records. So it wasn't like you could really drive in your car. I mean, unless you had an 8-track, but you can't really, you had the radio.
8-track was nice.
But you had to, you
never knew what the next song was.
I know. Well, and I never got it. You push the button and it just randomly jumps to some point.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. It was like a radio.
Yeah, but I mean, there's like no rhyme or reason, just like randomly, because
Someone should bring back the 8-track. That would be so cool. You don't know what you're going to get. Like an 8-track for Spotify. I guess that would be shuffle. But with 8-track, it would start in the middle of the songs, though.
Yeah, it would.
Yeah,
that's
it would
what I'm
just anywhere.
saying. It would. Yeah, like I guess if you for those of you who remember cassettes, you would forward it and then you'd stop it and play it. But 8-track was like it would just jump, like you push a button, it goes dum, dum, and then now you could be at the beginning of a song, you could be at another song.
That would be great. I'm going to bring back 8-track for Spotify.
My mother still has an 8-track player and 8-tracks.
Well, let's see if we can get that in the studio.
Okay. All right. Yeah, we'll.
That would be great.
Supertramp, Breakfast in America.
Well, let's see if we can get that in there.
Religiously. And then right behind it at 22 million is AC/DC Back in Black. So this was their album after, of course, Bon Scott passed away and Brian Johnson joined them. Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction, freshman album at 18 million. So, I mean, and if you're a metalhead and you don't own Appetite for Destruction, you're not a metalhead at all. Behind that is the Black Album at 16 million by Metallica, which of course always makes me laugh because Metallica used to talk so much shit about Motley Crue. They were both out of California. I think Metallica was more in like around San Francisco area, and Motley Crue's out of LA, and so they talked massive shit. But then when Motley Crue released Dr. Feelgood, they had the producer, I think it was Bob Rock, who produced Dr. Feelgood, and it was such a huge album and it sounded so amazing that James, lead singer for Metallica, said, we need that guy to do the Black Album. And he did the Black Album. So all the shit they talked about Motley Crue, then they ended up using the same producer, and I'm almost positive it was Bob Rock, and that's just off the top of my head. Then we got another Zeppelin coming in, Physical Graffiti at 16 million. Pearl Jam 10, I believe this might have been their sophomore album, at 13 million. And then Bon Jovi, Slippery When Wet. Slippery When, what was that, Stormy? Slippery When?
Wet.
Thank you, at 12 million.
I have to do that better. Let me see.
Okay.
Let's clear the throat.
Yeah.
Wet.
There you go.
There it is.
It should have been titled Slippery When Wet.
Absolutely. That would have been much better.
Yes. And then also the next two, also at 12 million, Def Leppard, Hysteria, and Zeppelin, the second album. And then rounding it out is Houses of the Holy, Led Zeppelin again at 11 million. And those are, according to Loudwire, the top 10 largest, most selling metal albums of all time. And I own, let's see, what do I not own on there? I don't own Slippery When Wet. I don't own 10. Everything else I own. So I think I'm pretty good.
And I just looked on eBay while you were talking about that.
Uh-huh.
We can actually buy an 8-track player. And
oh gosh,
here's a classic rock 8-track cassette tape lot, including he's got Jimi Hendrix in here. We've got who else do I see?
Are they the original? Can you tell? Do they look like the original?
Earth. Oh, they're beat to hell.
Okay, so they're like for real 8-track.
For real 8-tracks.
Okay.
Joe Cocker. I mean, they're beat. We've got
wow.
Some Rolling Stones. We've got Queen. We got Devo. So maybe one day we should invest And too bad we don't have a. One day we should invest in these, bring in an 8-track player, and see what happens.
And
That would
just
be so
randomly
cool.
hit the button.
Just
Okay,
random.
so how much for that bundle?
So that, I mean, we don't have to spend that bundle. That was like $74, but there's some other bundles in here for $20. We can get an 8-track player. There was something that Panasonic called the Dynamite, which looks pretty cool because
Is that old? Like, or do they look like old machines, or
it
do
says
they
a
look like?
vintage Panasonic Red Dynamite TNT plunger 8-track player. So it just looks like one of those boxes that you press down for the dynamite to explode. So you just press it and you find out what the next song is going to be. It's got a speaker built into it. It actually doesn't look that old, but
Because I'm wondering if some companies are still making them for nostalgia reasons, like how
8-track player.
turntables, how like albums had their resurgence.
oh no, this is a vintage 70s. So this was made in the
Oh,
70s,
shit.
but it looks pretty cool. I mean, it's $90 though.
Yeah,
but
what
it
do you
looks
do
pretty
when
cool.
it breaks though? I mean, you're not going to be able to replace that.
You just throw it away.
Yeah. Well, actually, you can take it to Best Buy, all of your electronics, and they recycle it. They recycle it.
So there you go. We'll have to look and look and see what it takes to get a 8-track player. That would be kind of cool. There
And we
go.
can bring in a disco ball.
Yep, absolutely.
And then and we'll put some Off the Wall by Michael Jackson on there.
Absolutely.
That'll be great. So, well, as always, thank you for tuning in. Next episode, we'll be back to full force, I think. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll be back to full
Stormy's
force.
hitting the road again soon.
I hit
So
the road ahead. Yep.
it'll be he's going to be traveling through October, so he's going to be hit and miss. But hopefully, when he's here, we can get him on the show always. And of course, our book is on Amazon. Finance is the other F word. 10% of net proceeds going to Pause, providing animals with support, and Forgotten Not Gone. And Stormy's going to be on the road, coming to a main stage at Influence.
On the road again.
There you go, Willie Nelson.
Going places that I've never been.
Okay, that is a verse in there, not in that order.
Okay,
but
wait, let me see. On the road again. Seeing things that I've never seen before.
That's also in there. Yeah, I like. He's just kind of like you're like one
on
of those
the road again.
one of those puzzles that are squares and you have to move the squares
Yeah,
around until it tries to
absolutely.
make something. But you know
There
it's
it is.
okay. He's doing it. So anyway, and follow us on social media. Thanks for tuning in.
Yep, we'll see you guys soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Be sure to check out our Finances the Other F Words playlists for each episode on Spotify.